It's like trying to win a car race.
Should be a good one.
And as you're driving, saying, hey, make it run better.
You could have a posse of waifus.
Starting off kind of strangely.
Slaying the land.
Welcome to the show.
This is insanity.
Taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week.
This info is pretty shocking.
Somebody's got to give an answer to this.
This is Augmented Reality.
You are watching my favorite channel.
I've not heard of them.
The Triple S League. Enjoy, guys.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast, your source for news, leaks, and analysis of games of the gaming industry, coming at you live on YouTube and Twitch, and archived almost anywhere you can find podcasts. If you missed the show after the fact, you like listening on the road, you can find the audio versions on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and a variety of other places. It actually pushes it out to a bunch of apps that I'd never even heard of. It just does that, automatically. So, yeah. I don't really know how podcasts work, but we do put it out there for you. And, of course, you can listen live twice a week right here on Triple S Podcasts and see the archived video version as well. My name is Ash. I'm here with Subsidian and Moodtag. As always, how's it going today?
Hello. It's very good.
Good.
Made some delicious chicken last night. Super excited to eat it today.
Nice. We've been trying out these delivery meals that you can get where they deliver you the fresh ingredients, and you make the meal. Everything's pre-portioned, but it's all super fresh and it's super great. It's been amazing for a bunch of reasons I didn't even consider. One is I've been able to teach my kids how to cook all this great food that I had no idea how to cook. So I'm learning as much as they are. But yeah, we've been having some great meals around here the past couple of weeks.
In other words, you're getting them to, learn how to cook food that you don't know how to cook, so that they can keep cooking it in the future.
Yeah, pretty much. So they can cook for me. That's why I had kids, so I could stop cooking and doing chores and all that. If you're listening live this morning, please say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well, and we will read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. Don't forget to slam that like button. He likes it rough. And it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. And I'll definitely put your thoughts in the live chat or in the content requests channel on the Discord server. We want to hear your thoughts about what you think about the info that we have about the Elden Ring. It's going to be kind of an Elden Ring heavy show today. That's probably going to be what we spend the most time talking about. It's been a bit of a slow week. I mean, it's on a normal week we probably wouldn't devote most of an entire show to a game that we know very little about, but this is an interesting one. So this week it's definitely worth devoting some time to it, but it may be a little bit more of a laid back show today. We do have some other interesting stories as well, including sort of a actually, let's start with this feel-good story, because we all need some positivity. So let me just bring it up on the screen here. So the Ghost of Tsushima devs are being given quite what I imagine is quite a great honor. They have been named IRL, like for real, tourism ambassadors for the actual island of Tsushima, Japan. Because they, according to the mayor of Tsushima, so I guess it's sort of, I don't know anything about this island, so I don't know if it's all one city or how it works over there. But anyway, they've been honored for sort of bringing awareness about Tsushima to the general public through their work on Ghost of Tsushima. So that's very cool. It's kind of a really nice feel good story to start the morning here. Here's Jason Connell's response on Twitter. I've had a really fortunate career, but this is almost hard to even process. Thank you, Tsushima. So, and the mayor, am I going to say this wrong? Hidekatsu said he would love to make the entire team ambassadors, but I guess that's kind of not really something that would be a little bit crazy. But they
that would be a lot of people. Yeah,
that would be a lot of people. And yeah, I'm looking for his actual quote here. Yes, okay. So the appointment of the tourism ambassador is from today until Mr. Jason and Mr. Nate no longer wish to have it, said the mayor. In fact, I had been thinking and discussing about appointing the role to them ever since I discovered they were using Tsushima's name as the name of their work. He added, I did not appoint them for the purpose of having them do anything in the future. Thanks to the two of them, Sucker Punch Productions and SIE, I have heard from people all over the world who have learned about Tsushima through their works and now want to see, know, and go to Tsushima.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is a very interesting place. It is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically right between Busan from Korea and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Fukuoka, which is one of the cities on the Korean side of the coast of Japan. So it's this big island that's right between, smack dab between the two of them, and is like, it's like ridiculously close to both shores, in the form of like how close it is to each one. So it's almost equal distance from one of its shores to Republic of Korea, and then from another one of its shores to again another island right off Japan, which is a somewhat big one. But yeah, it's very interesting to, like, the history there is, obviously there's a ton of history there.
That's probably why. I mean, that's why the location was chosen for.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
for
obviously.
There's another interesting quote here. Even a lot of Japanese people do not know the history of the Genko period. When it comes to the world, the name and the location of Tsushima, it's literally unknown, so I cannot thank them enough for telling our story with such phenomenal graphics and profound stories. So that's very fascinating. That it really through a piece of artwork, these guys became ambassadors for this island. So yeah, very interesting, and we definitely wanted to start with something positive, and then here's another story that may be positive as well, although we don't really know a lot of what's going on here. But hat tip to Ghost MD, who posted this in our content requests channel on Discord this morning. Hidden Path Entertainment is hiring to develop a AAA third-person open-world fantasy RPG that takes place inside the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Now, I don't know too much about this studio, but here are some of their games that they have created in the past: Raccoon Lagoon, Brass Tactics, Witchblood, Access Code, Hypercade, Defense Grid 2. They apparently did the Age of Empires 2 HD edition, so they've done some work with Microsoft, I guess. And they also created this little, I think, niche title named Counter-Strike Go.
Yeah, I'm sure most people have heard of that.
I'm surprised that one's not up at the top there. Like, why is that? Did they put these in chronological order? Like, that one should be that one should be first and foremost. That was, of course, Sarcasm is a very, very popular game that's being played. It's still being played by tons and tons of people.
This is so interesting. So we'll kind of get into this a little bit more, but I just want to point out that for like, I'm really shocked just overall that it's taken this long. We went like more than a decade with extremely few D&D titles, and basically absolutely zero, except for one terrible MMO, actual like multiplayer D&D games, which is shocking and horrifying considering that D&D is a party-based group game that most people in the gaming world are familiar with. And for over a decade, there was basically nothing. Despite the fact that Neverwinter Nights, the original one, was one of the first community supported persistent online worlds built into MMOs, and they did it really coolly. So the game couldn't support more than like 64 people on it at a time. There was some people who found out how to make it to almost double that, to a little over 100. And then they would stitch these servers together so that you would leave one server and it would transfer all of your most recent character data over to the other server for a different region. So main cities were quite full almost all the time, but then out in the rural areas and the exploration areas and some of the dungeon areas, there was like 20, 30, 40 people on those at a time. And because of the way that the PvP system worked, you would have a lot, in a lot of cases, you'd have to role play your PvP because there wasn't actual PvP allowed. Because of a lot of limitations that they had. And so you had to like honor play, roles and shit. And it was amazing to take part in that, to see that. And then it was equally as shocking and amazing when a bunch of idiots decided that that's the most D&D games that the world needs right now. We don't actually need the ability to sit down and play a D&D dungeon with a game master with your friends online. Like that's just stupid. Why would we want to encourage anything close to that? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because it's absolutely ludicrous. Nobody wants that kind of a gaming experience. Are you joking? Like what's wrong with you? And again, it's like I'm just, even to this day, I'm still flabbergasted that it took so long for them to actually start developing this kind of tech. And I think they didn't even do it until Pathfinder came along. Pathfinder is a type of D&D experience. It's a different company. They follow more of the rules of 3.5 instead of 5e. And it wasn't until they started pumping out their game and it got super popular and people were starting to shift over to that in mass, because that was the only game they could play. There was even like, early in the days of like game apps on the phone, there were a ton of like people who were pitching ideas and pitching like, oh, here, we've made this game that you basically can play a dungeon with your friends on the phone. And those games, a lot of those projects were shut down super hard by certain company who has controlling interest in the IP and was like, yeah, this needs to be destroyed. You need to be, perhaps have lawyers show up and give you cease and desists and all this kind of stuff. And again, we just circled the drain of like nothing good coming out. Then Wizards of the Coast eventually got around to making their own app. They kind of featured some stuff, and the minute that they started being asked, like people were like, hey, can we split this up so that I can bring a team of people in, maybe introduce, immediately shut down everything to do with it. And then they buried the project. And it's like, again, it's just, I'm sitting here looking at this going, it wasn't until this again, Pathfinder basically opened up this possibility that's when they started working with these, working with Larian Studios, working with these other companies, allowing them to start making these games. And now it looks like they're going full in, because this is like one of like 5 major D&D projects that are up and coming. Like,
oh, I didn't realize there were that many.
Oh yeah, no,
it
literally has exploded in the, sorry, what'd you say?
No, there's like so many different versions of like this kind of adventuring group type dynamic through like lots of different other themes, like not just D&D, but like other takes on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I saw a theme with like unicorns or with like crystals or something, and it's like they're trying, like now there seems to be like more of a movement of people being like, we're not content with what's out, we want to put out our own thing.
Yeah.
Well, there was probably a hunger for it, since Wizards of the Coast wasn't doing much with it on the video game front. And why they wouldn't, It's very confusing.
It is extremely bizarre why they even when one of the moments that you might be able to say that kind of shifted D&D back into the mainstream was Stranger Things. Like Stranger Things started with a D&D game, and it started with it in the show, and obviously, but the creators were huge D&D fans. But even before then, it was growing in popularity. It was really starting to like get bigger and bigger and bigger, and gaming cafes and whatnot. We've you know there's a ton of those around, and they started to like host more and more and more stuff. And again, you saw this hunger, and people kept asking and asking and asking and asking, and these big corporate types were just like, nah, 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 nah. Then suddenly it's like, oh, look at Pathfinder. Oh, they're making lots of. Okay, guys, we got to get as many people in making new games as possible.
I wonder if they thought that transforming it into a video game experience would take away from sales or interest in the tabletop game, which, I mean, I really don't see why it would, because it's a completely different kind of experience. But that's the only logical reason I can think of, is that they thought they'd lose money on the tabletop experience.
There's that, and there's also, like, you know, sometimes when you meet somebody and they're doing a cool thing, and you're like, wow, that's such a cool thing you're doing. That's so cool. I really enjoy watching you do the thing. Or some people might have a reaction saying, oh, that's such a neat thing. I also want to do the thing you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll have another group of people even who's like, oh, I like that thing you're doing. I'm going to keep it all for myself. Nobody else should have this but me. I should reap all the benefits from this. Like, there's so many different attitudes that people can approach this with. And it's unfortunate to see that's, like, there's more of the latter that's being presented right now.
Well, in the early, late 90s and early 2000s, there was a push to really, like, expand out the D&D universe. And I forget the exact years that this took place because it's been so long. But there was a time where they were, like, really, like, starting to embrace the added interest that they were bringing. A lot of young people wanted to bring their ideas and their stories, and for a very short period of time, they were interested in working with this. Then suddenly they clammed up like crazy, turned their backs on basically everything, and I've talked with some voice actors and actresses who experienced this. They were keyed up to do dozens and dozens of projects attached to the D&D universe, and there was going to be all this stuff, and it was mostly going to be like second or third party. And then overnight, all of them got crushed. Like everything got crushed. Everything was canceled, and there was just this. They just. Essentially, D&D and Wizards of the Coast basically just disappeared off the technical digital world map almost completely, and didn't show their face again until just recently. And now, you know, just a few years ago when they started making these deals. And again, it's like there were a handful of games that were made between that time, but most of them were just like I remember one. It was a horrendous garbage action game, and I'm like, why would anybody make this and think this was D&D? It's so confusing. It's about as confusing as the people who want like I get it. I'm not insulting you, but it's the confusion of like people who you know, they think that a gamified version of D&D wouldn't have dice rolls and wouldn't have any like pauses in combat. And again, that's confusing to me how people think about it like that. Again, I'm not insulting you. I just don't get it. And not to say that it's a bad thing. But I just don't get it. I don't understand. But you know, there is that draw, I guess. So,
well,
I don't know if that was what the creators were kind of thinking or going for, or thinking that you know that's what that's what a gamified version of it would be. There were some god awful terrible movies done too. There was a really terrible D&D movie that was put out too, and a lot of this stuff, it just ignored the experience of what the tabletop was and followed a more like a Hollywood idealized version of like, fantasy, combat kind of thing, where it's just really kind of quick and fighty and swords flashing and that kind of stuff. So again, I understand. I get it. I do. I totally understand the desire to have different things done in different ways, I guess. But here, I don't understand why Wizards of the Coast basically vanished off the face of the planet. Because again, it wasn't that they didn't have, top studios saying, "Hey, we'd like to work with your IP." They had people lining up around the block to do that. Always. Like they never stopped having people knock on their door and say, "Hey, we'd like to work with the IP." Really big, really good companies. But for some reason, Wizards just said, no, we're not interested, and just kept on shutting the door on these people's faces. And again, you wonder why. You wonder why anytime anybody leaves something on the table, especially when they weren't necessarily the original creators, they're just like people responsible for bringing it forward, and they're not interested in bringing it forward. They're just interested in just sitting there. So really weird and bizarre.
I suppose it's possible that they were working on something behind the scenes and then realized, we can't do this ourselves, and then opened it up for other studios. I suppose that's one possibility, but just don't know anything for sure on that front. I did want to highlight this comment here because I fully agree. Can we please have the unique D&D races? Please, I can't stomach any more humans, elves, dwarves, orcs. My kingdom for changelings, dragonborn, turtles, warforged, kenku, yuan-ti, tritons, minotaur, centaur, kobold. The list goes on.
I can give you a little bit of an update on this as far as Baldur's Gate goes. There is some references in the game that are circled, that are focused around those races, specifically the turtle and some of the other ones that you mentioned. There is a book in the existing version of Baldur's Gate that talks about a party made up of these characters. So it's either a nod or it's a confirmation that these are races to expect to get at some point down the road. I think that this is probably not something that we'll get at launch, but this is something that we'll quite possibly get post-launch with like DLC
as playable races.
Playable races.
Cool.
All they have to do. So right now, and again, mods do a lot of this. Right now, almost any creature in the game currently, there's a mod to allow you to play as that character during, or to create that character during character creation. So there's some Minotaurs in the game, and already there's a mod that allows you to play as a Minotaur. Now, obviously, some of the conversation rigs and stuff like that haven't been built up quite as good, and some of the animation is a little wonky. But this is still super early on. And there's lots more room for both the mods and the company to add things to the game. Now, I know that some people are like, well, why don't they just add them? Because it's very difficult. And I know that they want to, but they're having a lot of difficulty getting, obviously it takes a lot of time and effort to fully add a character created races into the game. But it's something that I think their vision of this down the road, after full release and after they get the multiplayer into your hands, where it's actual GM multiplayer, not playing through the campaign, so that you create your own story. I think they want to give you the tools that the community will be able to make and add almost any race to the game, and give them the ability to even create those new, like Moon was mentioning, those new world sets, right? So if you want to do a game of D&D Rick and Morty, you would have the ability to do that if there was enough modding and player creative interest in doing that. And again, so I have to say this really carefully, because the way that some people translate the stuff is like, so why don't they just add the Rick and Morty stuff themselves? It's like, well, because they don't have the license to, but they want to create the framework in which the community can go whatever direction they want to with this.
Plus,
And
why would they do that? Because, I mean, who how many people are going to want to play a Rick and Morty game?
A lot, actually.
Well, I'm sure a lot, but then a lot of, but a Rick and Morty D&D specifically. What I mean is, they can't just like add in, they can't reskin it for 100 different things. Like there would just be that's impossible. They provide the framework. Exactly.
The framework gets in there, then the people who are interested in bringing out certain things and allowing you to build, basically they want to give you their experience, their story within the Baldur's Gate universe, but they also want to give you essentially what's just a giant box of Lego and say, go nuts. And that's what, I mean, Sev has talked about this from time to time, is that what they want is they want to create a perfect D&D experience and then give you the tools to do the exact same thing. Because if they do that, and this is why I like their approach on this, and this is why I think their approach is great. So yes, they're creating the story, they're continuing on the Baldur's Gate saga. Yes, that is super cool, super interesting. This is definitely what people were excited for. Now, some people were like, "Oh no, we want it action based," or we want it like it looks like the traditional game where it's like just a squad that you move around on an isometric field. Instead of having like any like interactability, and they don't want cutscenes, and they don't want player interactive conversation wheels and that kind of stuff. It's like they don't want any of that kind of stuff. I get some people don't want that, but you have to appreciate them, that they're creating a story that they want to create, that they're then turning around and bringing to the community and giving them all the tools they made to make that, and saying, go make your own thing on top of that. I knew people who were playing the multiplayer MMO-ish Neverwinter Nights 1 game that didn't even play the campaign. They heard that they could play online with other people, and they bought the game to do that. And they never played, like they got tired of the intro like 5 minutes into the game because they just didn't like it. So they wanted to stick with this stuff instead. So that's kind of tools that they wanted to give them. And there were a lot of tools back in the Neverwinter Nights days. And I think there's still some servers that are still set up right now, or that they're set up from time to time. And that's a very, very old game. It's ridiculously old. But it's so cool to see that kind of tech now being brought to the forefront of this new stuff, because if the interest is high enough and we're starting to see more and more of this, then the sky is the limit, and the experience of any tabletop experience can then be ported to this world at some point. So this is really great stuff. We're honestly seeing some really great experiences here, and we're seeing a lot of growth here in this game genre, and it's about time.
All right. Thank you so much for that overview. And yes, so we'll be interested in seeing what they come up with here. And I wouldn't mind more and more variety of games in the Dungeons and Dragons tradition.
Yeah.
Different styles of games. I mean, I'd play an action-based D&D game for sure. Understanding
and
that's
we got Cyberpunk Red 2, right?
I'm sorry, say again?
We got Cyberpunk Red 2 is right.
Yeah, so I mean it just shows how the tabletop turn-based experience can translate into an action-based action adventure kind of game and appeal to a different type of audience. Now, I mean, granted, we I think most of us want Cyberpunk 2077 to be more RPG-ish.
Mm-hmm.
But
Hands down.
had it gone, I mean, and we've kind of gone through the reasons and how they kind of rebooted things and re-centralized the story around Johnny Silverhand partway through development. So there was definitely, some things that went on behind the scenes there. But anyway, yeah, definitely if you open it up, bring a variety of games to it. I mean, Star Wars has done that. There's been every kind of Star Wars game, and every single one of them has had an audience.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
maybe.
a comment from Renston in the chat as well that I liked. If you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm. Renston's listing off a bunch of games. So anyway, yeah. So there we go. All right, so let's move on to talking about the Elden Ring. A bunch of news about Elden Ring this week. There's some rumors and what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, rumors and behind-the-scenes things that we will discuss. Of course, a lot of this needs to be taken with a grain of salt because we don't have a lot of official information about the game. And I think that when we look at how this game is being marketed, which is essentially barely at all at the moment, compared to a game like Cyberpunk 2077, I wonder if you and I were talking earlier this week, Cyber. Is this going to be a sleeper hit? Is this going to be sort of a quiet release that is a big hit?
It's not going to be a quiet release. It's going to be like when I said sleeper hit, I'm like, this is going to be a hit that not many people are keeping their eye on right now. In
terms of the marketing of it until the actual reveal.
Right now, the only people paying attention to this game are super fans of this studio, and possibly this genre. There's a handful of those kinds of people who are in watching that, which really is this studio, because this studio essentially created that genre, basically. And I mean, they're basically, there hasn't been a ton of fanfare. This trailer that's been going around hasn't been viewed 10 million times. It's been viewed a few million times by a small group of people. And when I say small group of people, I don't mean small. I mean 100,000, 200,000.
It's a big niche. Let's put it that way. The FromSoft games, the Soulsborne style, the Soulsborne sort of subgenre of action games it's somewhat niche. And it's even hard to call it that because it is very popular and it has a lot of diehard fans of that, to the point where it became a huge argument, it became a huge issue when it came to, should Sekiro have an easy mode for people who just want to experience the story. And there was, this argument about, accessibility versus gatekeeping and all of these things. It got a little ridiculous, to be perfectly honest with you. But it was, it's got there's a big audience for this style of game, and there are a lot of people that have their eyes on it, of course. All right, hello everybody. I apologize for that. We just had something happen up here, and our internet completely cut out for a few minutes there. Not just mine, but Sibes as well. And I don't know if you realize this, but we do not actually live very close together. So there was some kind of hiccup in the.
It was an entire region hit that just took out half the internet in our entire region area.
But it was short-lived, thankfully.
Just went out.
Yeah.
And then back again.
Very short-lived, thankfully. So, yes, I see you folks are reading my live chat messages. Please do let me know that this is, Moosassins. Okay, yes, it was the Moosassins. They attacked the internet. That's all right. I'm going to assume, based on Robin's joke, that we're back online here.
They Robin jokes about that, but Robin, you have no idea. You have no idea how frightening a moose is until you see one run through a forest, a thick forest, and not make a dang sound. With these gigantic. Also, I think I mentioned it on the show a couple of times. Moose, when their horns are molting or whatever it's called, It's where so they grow these horns every year, and then every year the velvet on the horns hardens and turns into horns, and the skin on the horn has to, like, it doesn't have its purpose anymore. So the moose will then scratch the skin off the horns because it's quite itchy for them, which is horrifying and terrifying because you'll be in the jungle, or not the jungle. You'll be in the woods out here, and you'll see
what country
trees
do you live in? Yeah, okay.
just covered in blood, like just like blood everywhere, and then you'll see a moose which is just dripping with blood everywhere, and there's like bits of skin hanging off their horns. Deer do this too, but it's not as brutal as like a moose who's like 8 times the size of a deer. And then they'll give you their like head nod, like, hey, I'm gonna skewer you if you keep standing there, kind of thing. And it's a little frightening the first time you see that. And moose are no joke.
I've seen them leap fences before, which you would not think that a creature that size could leap a fence, but they do.
Yeah.
Anyway,
elephants can't jump. Like they're literally incapable of jumping. They can't.
That
get
doesn't
all
surprise
4 of
me.
their feet off the ground at the same time. But like a moose will clear a road in a single jump, and they're like some of them get up to like 2 tons. So,
However, you say to Robin that he has no idea, but he lives on an entire continent of killer creatures. So, I think he has some idea of what frightening creatures are all about.
Yeah, but they're all small there, right? Like they're all like tiny,
Jeez,
which is more frightening because it's like,
well, yeah, then you can't see them coming.
yeah, I know, because you can't see them coming. I've often said I would trade current mosquitoes for mosquitoes that are like the size of like bats or like pigeons. I guess that's probably a better size descriptor, because then at least it's easier to like hit them and know that you killed them. Whereas like the tiny little ones is like first of all you're fighting thousands of them and whatnot. So anyways. So,
what
Elden
about
Ring.
crocodiles? And ever been kicked by a kangaroo? I don't know about you, but that's not something I want to
true.
experience.
Crocodiles could get quite big too. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
7-foot roos? Are you kidding me? All I know is that some of my wife's family did an exchange, and they lived in Australia for a while, and they were told not to kill the house spider. There was a giant spider living in the house that they were staying in. Don't kill it because it eats all of the other bugs that you don't want around. So they'd live with this huge spider just wandering everywhere. Yeah, different world. It's a different world. Plus, I don't think I could get used to hanging off the ceiling all the time. Anyway, let's get back on topic here. So now that our technical woes seem to be ironed out, so the Elden Ring. Now, I can't remember exactly where we left off in the discussion. I think I might have been talking about how loopy I was feeling.
I think you were talking about, so I think we went out when we were talking about the genre. So the genre is this like, very difficult, and in some cases it's usually somewhat linear, or at least the levels are linear. Like you can choose where to go, but they're like very, very linear levels. So that's the type of genre. Other games have tried to open it up to be more open worldy. And so in Sekiro, you have something that's far more open and more trackable than the original concepts of the stuff. The original games were extremely linear, but as the games have like progressed, they've gotten more and more open worldy because a very narrow, tight, confined linear world is really rough.
It can work. I mean, it works in a lot of games, but I think the most defining feature of the genre is the really sort of tough as nails melee combat that is strategic, stamina based, and blocking and parrying and dodging are huge components of it, and really having to be strategic and precise in how you attack and defend in order to defeat the enemies. And of course, they're all very different. You have a variety of very unique bosses that are usually humongous. plus your fodder enemies, which are also not all that easy. So there was that's definitely a key aspect of the genre, which is why, of course, when there were people asking for an easier mode for Sekiro, just so people, for those who just wanted to enjoy the story. And this became a big debate at the time. Does it need an easy mode? And should the fans of this genre really be gatekeeping and saying no? It's ruining the experience to to put an easy mode in, or somehow, like, does it really deprive if you enjoy the Souls games and you've 100%ed them on the hardest difficulty, or I don't even know if they have difficulty levels. I don't think they do. But if you've 100%ed them, beaten the toughest thing, does it really take away from your experience if there's somebody else out there who just wants to enjoy the story without the really, really tough difficulty? I mean, that's my question. But anyway, what do we know about this new title from Software? Well, it's going to be a Souls-like, and so we can expect that type of genre that we were just talking about. And we've seen that in the leaked trailer that came out a few days ago. We talked about it on Saturday, or on Wednesday rather. We're going to go into a little more detail today. We're going to talk about some specifics that we've been able to pull out from looking at the leaked footage. We're not going to be showing the leaked footage here.
Yeah, it's still takedownable.
It is takedownable. They haven't been taking it down, which is, I mean, perhaps they just don't care.
It's an enormous amount of time to try and chase it down and to take it down from all of the different sources. Plus, it's like, and I suspect we're going to be seeing this a little bit more, because a studio can't put out game footage now of them 2 years into development, or a year and a half, 2 years away from release, and not get burned by that down the road. Like, they just can't do that anymore. It's just not something that is feasibly possible, just due to the incredible insanity and difficulty of trying to get that connected out to the audience, and understand that we're showing you what we're working on, aka this is not a finished
final
product.
Yes, CD Projekt Red got burned by that hard, and I think I think what happened with
and they're not the only ones. I mean
Sure.
dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of other studios are facing the same difficulty, the same frustration, where they show somebody what they're going for with the gameplay, and then the audience is like, I saw, and sometimes it's psychosomatic too, which is a much smaller case, obviously. Where, I mean, I've heard people talk, like, I've heard people talk about, like, seeing a game trailer and they're like, "Oh man, why didn't you do this?" And I'm like, no, you're confusing that with a different game. And I mean, even I had that, I confuse those two colonial era type games. I confused two of them once in a podcast. It was really funny. But it was because they looked so similar, and the gameplay content was so similar. And, so we all have that mistake. But I mean, I'm like, dude, no, what you're thinking about isn't that game. It's a different game, same genre, same general look. And they're like, no. They're just changing it now because they want to screw us over. And it's like, okay, they're not. Game devs don't sit down and have long-winded discussions on how they can intentionally screw over their player base. Like, that just doesn't happen with, anybody aside from, EA and Activision. Excuse me. Supposedly, allegedly. This is just not something that happens. So again, we have this scenario and this difficulty, obviously, of like the gamers seeing something and expecting that to come out. So now the work around this is to have stuff, quote unquote, leak. And if things leak, then you get the feedback that you were looking for. You get the hype train that you were hoping to get, but you don't actually have to take responsibility for any of the stuff that was shown off. And if somebody says, "Well, why didn't you?" You're like, "That stuff was never meant for public viewage, anyways. It was pre-alpha. Lots of features were changed since then, and then your community is more than willing to defend them." So again,
that is what we're being told
brilliant
about.
idea.
Well, it really is, if that's what's going on. Do you suspect that this was an intentional leak? Because we do have
no. Well, I don't know this particular studio enough to guarantee that, but I don't think it was, because of how it was recorded. Somebody was smart enough to record it so they recorded it on their phone, and then they edited that stuff from the phone up instead of recording it direct from the screen. And again, it just like if you were wanting to sneak it out, you would have done a couple things a little bit differently. So that's why I don't think this is necessarily a an intentional leak. I think this is just something that
but it serves the same essential purpose. Yeah. It allows you to, now that it's out there, they can look at that, they can look at the reaction to it, they can gauge what people are saying, and take that as feedback. And so plus again, like, it's just you start going to take things down, what does everyone talk about then? The story becomes, From Software is going around taking down this footage, and really it just creates a Streisand effect anyway. So yes, probably best to just be like, oops, and then just forget about it and get back to working on your game. And forget about DMCAing everything. I mean, it's free. It's free hype and free advertising, really. And there's been very little about this game. There's the community that's looking forward to this release. I mean, they've gone way beyond creating fan art. They've gone to creating their own sort of fan lore. Like they write extensive lore about what they think this game is about, and it's an art, and all of it is speculation on their part, but they're having a blast doing this apparently. And so yes, there's a lot of people hungry for what this game is and what it could be. So things that we know that there's going to be some form of mounted combat through at least certain areas, or perhaps through the whole thing. That was kind of big. We know that there's different classes, and it appears as if the classes are different at character creation. I want to put a caveat on that, saying that they have had classes that can kind of mix and match their abilities, and you could basically start with a blank slate and you can basically build whatever you want. So it could still be that, or that could still be an option on top of the regular classes, which are more narrow and defined. But yeah, there was clearly distinctive classes, not just because of their costumes, but because of they had like engage abilities and reactions from like getting hit, and then doing like a what do they call those in fighting games? It's like a knock up or like a kick up kind of thing, like where you get off the ground. And those, not only was the abilities different, the animations were completely different as well. Like completely different animations for doing the same thing, like just jumping. So that's how we know that those are different classes, not just a different choice of abilities and stuff like that. That's been hard built into to kind of give classes, and the previous games have had classes before, so this appears to just be something that they've doubled down on. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Obviously it does appear that there's a significant difference on gear, on a whole bunch of other things. There does appear to be some unique ways that you quote unquote level up or power yourself up through various upgrades. There wasn't that much we could dig out of that, but that did appear to be a thing. And then bosses, there's big bosses, little bosses, all kinds of mobs in between. We don't know which were bosses and which were just
general enemies. Could be that we didn't see any of the actual bosses, or could be that we've seen like 3 or 4. So it's a big mix, and I think this is going to be a big hit because this is going to be the first of these games that has a huge, gigantic open world that looks as if it's been designed for multiplayer or maybe persistent play of some sort. There's a lot of question as to how the multiplayer will work. It's worked differently in different games that they've done before. What might we be seeing them actually doing something that's more persistent? We don't know yet. Obviously, these are things that are completely under speculation right now. A bunch of sites were speculating on whether or not they would have multiplayer and what form that multiplayer would take. But yeah, it's in the process of obviously being refined. We're looking at probably. I still wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't come out this year, if it comes out in 2022, just due to delays and a bunch of stuff.
We do know that the game's been internally delayed to the world situation with the shutdowns and things. Of course,
Well,
I mean, it's affected. It's affected everybody. It's affected
Mhm.
everybody in the industry. It would be nice to get this one in 2021. We'll have to see.
Hacking right now is a huge problem. There's a lot of hackers that are going after these companies because sometimes they are not as secure as they would like. They have an internal server that's easy to breach, that's based off the web, that gives all their passwords and access logins for their teams to use in getting into their virtual network to work on the games from home. And this is how we believe now, just coming from some of the stuff that's been coming out about the CDPR hackers, that's kind of how they were taken, is that they got access to one system, which allowed them to access a different system, which then allowed them to access everybody's system, and they locked people out of their own computers, which is obviously a huge problem. But people couldn't even access their own basic computers, so there's a lot of work lost. Thousands of man hours just disappeared, just gone off the ether. And so this is a huge problem, and lots of studios are having more and more problems and having to pull their hair out on a regular basis. So that's no fun. We really feel sorry for them and bad for anybody who's having to go through this right now. But yeah, does mean that things are not moving along smoothly, which really sucks.
Looking at the leaked footage itself, it does look like it is something that's going to be a little more open worldy. And it looks like it's going to carry forward some of what we saw in Sekiro. Now, in terms of visual design, and gameplay design, and in a variety of aspects, this resembles Dark Souls a lot. And I've been looking at commentary from some more Dark Souls focused channels on it, and it does look like it's almost Dark Souls 4 with a different skin, in a lot of ways. But it has its own world. It has an overarching mythos and whatnot, and George R.R. Martin was involved in the creation of this world. So it's its own world, it's its own IP, but from what we've seen, the similarities to Dark Souls are striking. But what we've seen is also at least a year old, if not more. It was an internal trailer intended for internal use by Bandai Namco. It was not something that was ever intended to be seen by the public. And so really, the game could have evolved way beyond that at this point. And so it's really hard to get a gauge on how much of what we're seeing is actually going to be in the final game. We did see some fantastical, huge creatures, which of course, typical of Dark Souls. But that's one aspect that I really enjoy about action games, is when the creatures are of varying scales and there's some really mysterious creatures. And of course, whatever the Elden Ring is, it does appear to be what you're going after. It's It's your reason for setting off on your adventure. There was mounted combat, as I mentioned. It looks like there is some sort of stealth mechanic, a jump mechanic, rolling. Of course, there's rolling in a FromSoft game. And, a huge variety of weapons. There's a magic mechanic, and then a bunch of the other things that Subsidian mentioned there. Now, let's talk about the console generations and what effect that might be having on this game's schedule. And it was initially announced for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and now we've had the turnover to the new console generation. So do you think that they are hunkering down and taking a little extra time to create a next-gen version? Is it going to be... I mean, I imagine since they announced it for the previous gen consoles that...
Mm-hmm.
Do they have... I mean, I don't know. Are they obligated to provide it for those consoles now, or could they upgrade it to the new console version and just release it there?
Well, I think they're gonna fall for the trap of trying to release it on everything, and we're going to have to deal with this for the next probably 2 years, and even maybe more now, just due to the delay of them actually being able to get these consoles out to everybody who wants them, who everybody can afford them. Not to mention, people who are still saving up for them. For some people, they're not going to be able to get this until maybe there's a price drop, or maybe for another 2-3 years yet, just because of everything. So we're going to see the existing console gen stick around for a little bit longer, which is honestly a terrible thing for gaming, because that means that we're going to have another 3 to 4 years of game development built around specs from a decade ago. And that's not good. I've talked about how this is the fault of consoles. This is where consoles fail. Consoles are great for people on a low budget, but they're also great in the sense of like being able to, and originally they really helped with being able to guarantee that certain games would be able to sell a certain amount of stuff, right? Because you knew you had a certain audience there, and that audience would typically buy X number of games from this genre on a norm, and you could more easily invest and help studios grow when you had more confidence that your sales number was going to hit a certain percentage or a certain level. And this is why people kind of wanted to move away from PC gaming at the time. There was also a lot of very false information put out about pirating, and how like on the PC, your games would have a 35 to 80% piracy rate. That was never true. That was never true. That was true in some games that weren't sold in traditional stores. Like some of the early like indie type games and whatnot. But those developers in those indie games, I mean, they quickly hit mainstream appeal and received huge amounts of cash. So again, this whole concept of like, PC was pirate haven, that this was never true. This was a false story. This was presented with facts that were literally made up off the top of somebody's head. It never had anything basis in reality whatsoever. But you did have that kind of good thing where it did help the gaming industry a little bit, but now I'd say it's hurting more than helping, because tech and everything is in the realm of like games evolving are tied to a hardware that in the worst case scenarios is over a decade old,
which is huge in technology development.
And not to say that
there's so fast.
Yeah, and not to say that the games like Among Us or other games like that where you go back to basics, where you go back to a concept. There's a lot of games I play that are built on really, really, really old engines, because they're there for the indie guys. But it's the fact that the industry, the AAA industry, can't seem to get off this hump, right? Of like, oh well, we're gonna stay on the PlayStation, 4 or the PlayStation 3 or the original, whatever. We gotta stay there for as long as we can. And so they shun new technology. They shun new progression in the form of like hardware and software integration that leaves games basically being the same thing and the same thing and the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. And it's like
they're under the misconception that the thing will last forever, but what they don't realize is that like things don't last forever. Things may stay the same, from when you look at it, but like they're breaking down, and you need to do something to maintain it. Otherwise, it just won't survive. Things just don't last like that.
Well, and it's the companies that can adapt that survive. There's a reason you don't see a lot of blockbuster videos around anymore.
Right?
When you go and watch Captain Marvel, and it's like, oh, Blockbuster, I remember that. We used to go there and rent our VHSs and DVDs.
Yeah.
The companies that don't adapt will eventually get left behind, and that's part of the problem with having old school people running these corporations, and they think there's a certain way of doing things, and then something new comes along. It's like, this internet thing is a flash in the pan. Right.
It's a bubble economy. Pop.
And then look where we are now.
Exactly. So.
Yeah. Well, in reality, you look at it now. I think Blockbuster has been dead longer than it was relevant. Like that's shocking when you think about that. Like we're looking at technology is evolving so fast that it's like literally you blink and you miss something. And I always found it really odd and annoying and frustrating that for some odd reason, they just never ever had it. They never looked at like the Netflix or like the online streaming thing and said, at no point did Blockbuster say, oh yeah, this is a great idea. We can utilize this technology. Or they never looked at the ability of like getting in like, merchandise from shows, and shows never, I could never easily pick up a Scrubs, t-shirt, when I picked up the, rented out their like season 1 DVD or something like that. It's like, I could never do that. And it's like, maybe I did want to do that. Maybe, maybe Scrubs is a bad example. Maybe you wanted to do that with the Flintstones, or maybe you wanted to do that with, anything that was old. And Blockbuster had this ability to transition, but they balked it at every turn. Said, no, we're not interested in that. And it's like, and it drove them into the ground because they're too lazy, too stupid, and too old to stay with the times. So, yeah. Literally, I know. I have that now. Adam Smith thinks he's being smart in the chat, but he goes, "What's a DVD?" And I mean, I can't. I mentioned DVD, and kids these days are like, "What's that?" And it's like, it's like a VHS, except like, what's a VHS? It's like,
or
okay,
you say,
okay,
and they start laughing.
So it's stuff like that where it's like obviously driving me mental, but it's still not like it's not it's not the end of things, but learning to stay relevant is something that these places are having a hard time with. So will it be somewhat limited to them staying with the old console gen? And I'd have to say most likely yes.
Honestly, I don't. And I don't consider that necessarily a bad thing. I don't see it holding back the development of this game as much as it held back Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 was going for a huge next gen ambitions, and they just it just didn't hit it. And
an attempt was made.
I'm sorry?
An attempt was made, as I like to say.
An attempt was made. A mistake, mistakes were made. But this, I feel like this is following the Soulsborne formula, just based on what we've seen, with some innovations, with some improvements, and more open worldy. They're going to take advantage of newer tech for sure. I don't see it necessarily having a next gen version that's. I mean, it'll be graphically more advanced, perhaps, but not necessarily a innovation. Not necessarily massively different in terms of gameplay. I think when you get down to it, this is going to be a combat game that's based on the Dark Souls formula, which is a good thing. And if the world is interesting, if the story is really good, I think we'll have a solid title on our hands.
Mm-hmm.
Islington Girl asks, Dark Souls are pretty linear worlds, right? Traditionally, they have been, but in some of the more recent games, specifically in Sekiro, they opened up. It became more open worldy.
Open world was something that they always wanted to do. They just were limited with it. Like open world games require a lot of. I mean, they're a lot of work. Linear level is something that's very simple and easy to design.
Now that said, Sekiro's not open world in the way that, say, Elder Scrolls is. It took me a second to think of Elder Scrolls because it conflicts with like Elden Ring, like they're too similar, and I was like, what's that Bethesda one called? It's not open world RPG like that where you have tons of side quests all over the place. There are some, and as you go, it starts off somewhat linear. And speaking about Sekiro now, it starts off fairly linear, but you hit a point where suddenly there's branching options. You can go over there, you can go over there, or you can go over there. And there's something you have to do in each of those three places. And you have to travel there, so it's open world in that aspect. You can also go back and revisit all the places that you've been before. So it's open world in that sense. It's not open world in an Elder Scrolls sense of you can just go anywhere, do anything at any time, and just sort of live in the world kind of a thing. So it's a different kind of open world, but it's not linear, isolated levels like you say in Dishonored, which is not a bad thing either. If it was like that, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. But I think for this type of game, I really liked what they did with Sekiro. But linear games, I mean, it's a perfectly fine game format to have it more linear, to tell a story. I mean, there's such an emphasis on open world, but you can get a really good story, and you can focus in more on specific details and a specific type of player experience doing a more linear game. So it's all about what are you trying to deliver with this game? Are you just trying to deliver complete player freedom, or are you trying to deliver a specific story, specific experience, that kind of a thing? And so it's either way could be a good thing, but it does look like they're going more open world. But I suspect we'll be getting a more linear story, perhaps with some side quests here and there, but not necessarily like completely open world RPG freedom. You know what I mean?
I think that's what they're going to come out with this.
Well, it very well could be, and that would be fantastic too.
Because I think what they're going to go for is, I think they're going to go for very much an open world type, Zelda, slash Genshin Impact. Like these game formats have really, really taken off, and that's really where I think the money is for these games, especially if you can somehow combine that with some form of multiplayer. Imagine being able to play Breath of the Wild with your buddies. Like, wow. I mean, the Genshin multiplayer system for that game is fairly popular as is. People love dropping in and out of games. Like, all I have to do is, I haven't booted up the game in a couple of weeks, but last time I was on, it was like I was getting requests constantly for people to join my world. So, so that's something that I think is a direction that they do want to go in, and they will go as soon as they have the ability to.
So we do know that the game director, I'm not going to try to say this guy's name because I will butcher it, but he says the Elden Ring will have an open world ripe for exploration, but we should expect the Souls DNA to be very much intact. So I feel like they're going open, but not necessarily as open as, say, the Zelda series went with Breath of the Wild. It's my prediction, but we'll see. The game world and lore aren't entirely FromSoft's own creation this time. They collaborated with Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin, of course. And let's see. There's a few other things in this Everything We Know article. So there's the leaked trailer a little bit. Apparently, Phil Spencer's played quite a bit of the Elden Ring already. So the game is real. The game exists out there. This is, again, I kind of want to go back to, and there were quite a number of messages about this in the chat. I think we're getting tired of being shown, here's what we're working on, here's what we're going to create. It doesn't exist yet, but here's what we're going to create. And then, 2 years later, it comes out and it's nothing like that. And it's been overhyped and it's a disappointment. Yeah, just, you know what? Just make your game quietly and then release it like they did in the old days. I think I'm more hungry for that kind of a game release structure because, yeah, it's kind of getting tiresome being shown, say, the Anthem E3 2018 trailer and then being told, oh, yeah, that was all CG animated and constructed. That game did not exist. That trailer was totally faked. It's like, what a bunch of garbage.
Yeah, it's like, if they were to set up a trailer to showcase their stuff, you would think that the trailer is actually showcasing the thing they're trying to present. But it's where this disconnect is that I'd rather just be pleasantly surprised by, oh, this looks cool, and just kind of take it from like the cover and have it be in like a more ready state rather than like having people feel pressured. Oh no, we said we would do this thing. Oh god, let's just push it out.
Right, and then spend billions of dollars on what winds up being garbage. So
an attempt was made.
Yeah, an attempt was made. So there will be a character creator. So it will, and here's where we're going to get into some of the rumors that that have been coming out. There's been some sources that have proven reliable in the past are giving us some rumored information about this game. Of course, you have to take this with a grain of salt, because anytime we're talking about rumors, but it's interesting to look at. So some of the rumors, just want to clarify that these are rumors being reported on, but again, they do come from a source that has had reliable information in the past. Apparently, it will feature online PvP, some sort of multiplayer system, and a Souls series class system. Apparently, the classes and the character creator system are going to be classic Dark Souls stuff. It's not going to be Sekiro, where you had a pre-created protagonist, like a set protagonist in that one. There was no character creator. It's going to go back to more of a character creation system with different classes as Saib identified from the trailer footage, the leaked video footage. So apparently, by the way, this comes from Omnipotent, who has, according to WCCF Tech, proven to be a reliable insider in the past. All right, so apparently we'll have the same system that's been used in all the Souls games up until now in terms of character creation and classes. And then this person also confirms that this was, claims that this was not an intentional leak. Of course, I mean, who knows, right? I mean, if you do leak, you're never going to admit that you leaked something intentionally if you actually leaked it intentionally. You're going to be like, oh, oops. Well, it's a shame that got out there. I hope nobody watches it and gets all excited about the game we're creating. But the trailer that did leak was apparently made by Bandai Namco for internal use only. And he claims that From Software might not even have been aware of its existence. So, by the way, according to this other article from PC Gamer, folks like, where was that now? Jason Schreier had a comment. Maybe it wasn't in this article. Anyway, there's some folks in the industry are saying that we can expect an official reveal of this game soon. Now, soon, TM, what does that actually mean? Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is that summer? Is that fall? And then how much between that and the release? I hope more and more studios are not going to release the release date until they are entering the final stages of their polish state. That's right. I want them to be past beta, unless you're doing it what Larian does. I really don't think you should be announcing a game unless you spent 3 months bug crushing on it, like that exclusively. Like, you've added everything to the game that you've wanted to add. Now you're just, your entire studio, and you've brought on some help to just crush bugs non-stop.
Mm-hmm.
That should be the sole focus. That is very expensive. So I understand that there's some people who want to, who are looking to approach it more like the way that they're approaching it with Larian Studios, doing the early beta and then bringing in tons of feedback and talking to modders and talking to the community about what they want to add and what they want to see and getting the feel of it that way. I honestly think there's a lot of games that should be doing that, and that alone. I really think that is where they should be taking this from.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes, if you're going in that direction, if your goal is to just release a completed game and put it out there, then I completely agree. Just wait until it's done and then put it out there. Like, announce it like a couple of months before it comes out, or even less, where all you've got left is, again, bug crushing. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so. Apparently, also, even though we did get our first look at the Elden Ring from this leaked trailer, it showed us very little, according to this supposed insider. It doesn't showcase some key features like the weather system. Weather systems, I mean, they're cool, but at the same time, I feel like they're becoming pretty much expected in games like this. If you don't have dynamic weather, I mean, that just seems, I don't know, do you agree? Is that just sort of a base feature, or should be a base feature of any game that features an exterior environment now? At least if it's open world, like if it's...
I think that when you don't have weather or day systems or cycles, that the game does feel kind of weird. I am starting to feel that, like, where it's like, why isn't it nighttime? I've been waiting here for hours. Like that kind of a thing. I think that just adds a lot to it. Again, it really ups the scale of how much difficulty there is in making the product. And there's so much more to do. But, that's that if you can figure that out, then you figure that out. So, yeah.
Also, the goal with this one was to make a brighter, more colorful game than some of the Souls games have been in the past, but that doesn't mean we won't experience some of the very dark themes that are staples of that series. And again, this is not a Dark Souls game, but it almost feels like it is because of the apparent similarities. But maybe when we get the official reveal, there will be maybe we'll start to see more of what more of what this game has to offer in terms of standing on its own and not being so closely compared with Dark Souls all the time. We'll have to see. I kind of hope so. I'm hoping that it'll be that it'll really offer something unique in terms of story and world. So far, I mean, we know very little about it. And I kind of like that. But it did look very generic fantasy in some ways. The dragons, the wizard with the big floppy hat, like some of those tropes. But again, what we saw was old. How much has it evolved since then is just no way to tell. But anyway, it's been interesting to actually see. It's good to know that this game actually does exist. And is there anything else we want to say about it before we move on to our brief discussion of what's going on with EA and Bioware?
Nope. No, I think right now this is a game that we're going to keep our eye on. I was always anticipating that we'd cover it at least a little bit. This is a game that's typically up your alley, but if it's gone more open world, if there's a really just an absolute ton of character creation options that might interest me. I did enjoy. I was trying to pull it up here. I did enjoy that Code Vein game quite a bit. They had a really nice character creator. Was really disappointed with the DLC for that game. I bought the DLC pack expecting actual content, and they, in my humble opinion, did not deliver any of their DLC. Not worth it, at least. Like the all of the reviews for it were. I mean, the reviews for their DLC packs are mostly negative. They really dropped the ball on this. I can't believe how pathetic their content was. So yeah, never buy DLC packs. It's just very rarely are they worth it, and they just got worse and worse and worse and worse. But I did enjoy that. The story was interesting. The characters were kind of interesting. The combat was. I'm probably going to kick myself in the butt for saying this, but I found it fairly easy. I was like, oh yeah, this is easy. Again, it's not my typical thing, but I do play other games that require that high level of skill. So I was like, yeah, great, fun. I found it, decently challenging. One of my brothers was watching me play, and he's like, how many times did you do this fight? And I'm like, oh no, this is the first time. And he's like, no, it's not. You've had to have done this before. I'm like, no, this is the first time I'm fighting this boss. It's like, but you're doing it perfectly. And I'm like, well, not perfectly. I did get hit right there. So,
oh no.
I got close to getting. I think it was like I missed a chance to like attack, and I was like, I messed that up. And they're like, whatever. Again, I'm not bragging. I'm just different strokes for different people, right?
Well, so I'd be curious to see you take a crack at Sekiro. I've never played Code Vein. I don't know how it compares to games.
I can't get into Sekiro. This is like zero interest in that character.
Well, it's not the character so much as the actual combat. I'd be curious to see how it compares. But what I loved about Sekiro, that's
why I mentioned Code Vein, because Code Vein is basically it's the same thing. It's the same genre. It's the same.
Yeah, but in terms of difficulty, I mean, like
I think there's most people say Code Vein is more difficult than Sekiro, but I don't know. I could be wrong on that. That's the general feedback I get. So I know fewer people were able to beat Code Vein than they were to beat Sekiro. So I'm not sure because I haven't played them. I just know that Code Vein was you miss one attack by one of the end bosses and you instantly die. So like you miss like parrying or blocking or dodging one attack from the boss and you die instantly. So you have to literally like, it's not just that you have to like you have to play perfectly in order to beat that stuff. So I don't know how much of an exaggeration that is or not, because again, I play these games so very rarely.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious what the reaction times are, because like some of the windows to parry Like when you get to the tougher enemies, I'm sure some of the windows were like a tenth of a second in terms of if you miss that, and of course it was very, very easy to miss. So anyway, but what I loved about Sekiro is that this feel of there was just this world with all of these things out there in it. You never knew what you were going to come across. You'd go into, you'd wander into a dark cave, and there'd be one of those headless spirits just lurking in this cave. And maybe you weren't at a level where you could beat it yet. But then for the next couple hours you're playing, you're like, I know that's there, and I just want to go kill that thing. Cleanse this world of these evil things. And there was one part with there was a canyon where this gigantic snake lived. Just this feeling of just not knowing what to expect, and all of these fantastical, mythical things everywhere. I loved it. And in fact, watching the leaked trailer for Elden Ring made me want to go play Sekiro again. I did beat the main story on that. I hadn't 100%ed it just because the time it would have taken to go and beat all of the optional bosses, which are like even way tougher than the end boss of the story mode. I just didn't have time. I had to move on to other things, but loved that game. Absolutely loved it. All right, you are listening to the Augmented Reality Podcast, and we appreciate everybody being so active in the live chat. It's been an interesting show today with some of those technical hiccups and other things, but we are glad you're with us. Please do slam that like button if you appreciate this content. Subscribe to catch the show live or after the fact. You can also listen after the fact on many audio podcast platforms. And please do check out our Discord server. We've got a great community going on there. Lots of great people to meet, many of them in the chat right now, and lots of opportunities to get together and game with other people, talk about all the things you love to talk about. We don't just talk about video games there. You can talk about TV shows, movies, animals. I think there's a food room. There's all kinds of things. There's a book club that meets sometimes. So you can join and find someone who is interested in the things you're interested in. So it's a great place.
There's also the memes channel. Come join our memes channel. It's a hoot.
The memes channel is my source of happiness on
There's a discussion right now about how thick thighs save lives.
Yes. And sometimes I have to go in there and remind them this is not a discussion channel, but it's very funny. It's very funny. All right. So the one final thing we wanted to cover today is an update on the EA situation. And Subsidian's been digging into this because, we're very interested in what's going on with Bioware. And, we're fans of old school Bioware. We're fans of the IPs that they still hold on to, even though the studio is an empty shell of its former self. So we care about Mass Effect, though. We care about Dragon Age. What am I even talking about? Man, okay. You can tell my coffee cup is still half full, so that explains everything here.
Okay, so yeah.
But
so basically,
there's this report out from IGN saying that EA is, well, the headline is exactly this: EA is putting the future of its franchises, including Titanfall, into its studio's hands. Now, could this have something to do with Respawn's success with basically taking that approach and saying, "Hey, EA, we're doing this our own way"?
So there's a new game studio director. It's a chief studios officer. Sorry, I totally butchered that. So the the chief studio officer position was taken over by this lady named Laura. Laura took it over about 2.5 years ago-ish. She took it over from that idiot who was like, hey, you'll like this game, or else you can just, not buy it. And everybody was like, all right, well, we're not buying it. And he was like, what? I don't understand. That absolute waste of intellectual front yardage. For the most part, again, I'm talking in a lot of generalities. She was a manager on the Star Wars IPs back in 2013. So that was a very, very long time ago. When they were originally like kind of kicking that stuff off. She didn't stay there for very long. She moved out of that position relatively quickly and moved over to the publishing side of the company, where she was responsible for sales and revenue and that kind of stuff. And she has had that position for a grand total of like almost 12 years, until she moved into this position in 2018. So that's her background. She came out and did this speech, and again, you could say that this is just talk. This is nothing unique. This is the same like spiel that they've done time and time again. You could say that, and you'd probably be right. I can't promise that EA is actually turning over a new leaf, but we have seen some increased better changes since she got into that position. Naturally, of course, whenever you get into a position, changes and effects, especially in the world of game development, are still being felt from your predecessor for at least 2 to 3 years into your position. That's typically how long studios take to change direction on anything. And so her coming in here now, at this point, what we're starting to see is her tenure essentially take over and kick in. So what can we expect to see? The cynic in me says the same old. EA is a garbage company. It'll always be a garbage company. But the creative, more logical side of my head says that this was somebody who was responsible for their publishing, for their finances, and saw the direct impact that their choices were having on their bottom line, and may have moved into this position with the idea of who's been screwing this up for the last 10 years, and I think I can do better. So that's the hopeful side of me saying that, which again is not nearly as strong as this is EA. I don't think they're ever going to learn. I think that in 2-3 years we'll be probably not celebrating. We'll probably be mourning the closure of Bioware, as their IPs are put into the fridge and told that, said that, oh, well, we just need more time to develop, blah, 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 corporate speech BS. And that EA will stick to producing mass-produced video games of the sports type variety that targets, young children with microtransactions, and that's how they make most of their money. To me, that's just kind of how I feel that it's going to be. But I don't know. Respawn did their thing, and maybe there's some change. Apparently, they've dropped the multiplayer from Dragon Age. Apparently, they've allowed them to go back to the original concept of what Dragon Age 4 was supposed to be. How exactly is this going to play out? We don't really know. But I've been doing some looking around, and I've been doing some asking, some talking, and right now, almost everybody agrees that BioWare is feeling leaderless. Now, this is obviously a statement of essentially pure fact, as they just lost 2 of their biggest leaders at the studio, including the only person that was basically an original, team member, essentially, of that early day BioWare, creating those things, there for the big stuff, there for the the original Mass Effect, there for the original Dragon Age, there for these IPs and stuff, that they were that they were the leaders, and they're now gone. They both quit, the last 2 of them that they had. So who's there now? Who's leading? people who have never led before, people who haven't been behind the steering wheel of this kind of an operation before. How many of their team leaders have left over the last 10 years? Lots of them. The majority of them. I think they said there was 2 team leaders that were around when they were making the original Mass Effect or the original Dragon Age. I'm not really sure which they were saying, but that's like, so like out of all the different teams that you have, and it's not just team leaders, like there's internal team leaders and then there's like listed team leaders, right? So I don't know which of those, it contains, but this is really bad overall. And I suspect that this leaderless title that some people are using is very accurate. It is a very, very accurate self-description of where they're at. That they have been bleeding leadership for a long time now. There are very few people with a deep experience in similar positions left at the company that are now leading the company. The good news is that some internal leaders are starting to emerge, but will they be enough to help save the company? EA's new chief studio officer, this lady, Laura, she has been encouraging them to do that, but is it too little too late? Is it, where are they? How have they been managing? Can they turn this stuff around? Can they turn this ship around? I don't know. We'll see. But right now, the Edmonton office is feeling absolutely leaderless and has absolutely feels like they have no rudder, and feels like they're kind of just drifting right now. And when you're drifting, that's when you start running into, icebergs and shallow, rocks and that kind of stuff. And that's not good. Being leaderless, being rudderless is a sure way to get yourself sunk really, really quickly. But that is how the whole studio feels. And I suspect that we are not going to hear about somebody coming in to step in to take over Bioware for probably another 4 to 8 months at the very least. Means that we could be here in a year talking about how they still have an interim leader at that studio. If that's the case, then we know that EA hasn't been prioritizing this studio at all, and that they have no interest in helping this studio expand. So the sad thing is that it does look like we are looking at a Bioware that is essentially falling on its face. So
it's very possible that too much damage has been done. And
yeah,
that
and that's
just not
that's really
recover.
like, again, Respawn might be able to recover. They might be able to create a whole generation of new cool games over the next 20 years. But it could be that there was just too much damage done to BioWare of years upon years upon years upon years of first starting with the doctors, then all of their leaders being targeted out one by one every time they were like, hey, I feel that we need to do this. Well, corporate board says that you can't do that because how is that going to give us money for our I can't remember if we're not supposed to say that word, but the blow and the ladies of the evening,
party favors and the ladies and the other party goers.
Mm-hmm. Like how am I supposed to pay for my third yacht? I don't know. You're fired. You don't know what you're doing. Step down. It's like that's the stupidity that I feel that they've been facing for well over a decade now, and that kind of thing demoralizes and destroys studios. And EA has probably the best record of destroying strong, intelligent, good teams building games for decades. Like it's like they have a literal graveyard of companies that they moved in, they destroyed, IPs that are just left alone and dying and absolutely dead because they just wanted like some stuff, and they're just incompetent leaders.
Yeah, there's a comment from Redstone in the chat. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. And I like Robin's follow-up sense, instead of the senses. Yeah.
Well, Redstone also says, even if EA helped them, what could they do? Well, it's probably better if EA doesn't help, because EA helps. EA helps like I can't think of a good example, but it's like that line from Shrek. What you're doing is the opposite of help. Just stop. Stop. Just
yes.
Just let me die. No, but yeah, it would probably be best if EA just took their hands off for a few years and let BioWare do its own thing. That would probably give the studio its best chance of survival.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, yeah. So I think it's probably too far gone. I think they probably have run the risk of just not being able to get anything out there and do anything for a very, very, very long time. And I feel that this is a little bit too little, too late. Or it may mean that they need to completely reimagine the studio. In any way and in any case, I don't think we're going to be playing the games that we're used to playing from them. But, could be wrong. I hope I am wrong. I really do. I really hope that in 5 years we're playing a new round of Mass Effect games and we're loving it. That would be great. And it would be even greater if that was still going on in Edmonton. But the truth of the matter is that I feel that things are not going well. So yeah,
unfortunate,
that's
but
my thoughts. Yep.
That very well may be the case. And with that, we'll wrap up the show today. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Thank you for the great conversation in the live chat. We really appreciate that. We really appreciate all of those of you who are listening live and followed us over to this new live stream channel. Please do share this around if you appreciate this content. We really appreciate that very much, especially as we're trying to grow this particular channel and build our audience. And honestly, we're doing a little better than I expected to do right off the bat, but definitely want to continue and keep growing. And I want to extend a special thank you to our Patreon supporters and channel members. You've seen their names glowing in gold throughout the podcast. Up at the top of the screen, they come through. Those folks, they've really helped during this time of transition while we're sorting things out and figuring out how to best structure our content on YouTube and elsewhere. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, we're still in the exploration phase, so please give us your feedback. We are tempted to try a couple different new things. Also, I've double-checked now, and the Sekiro fans say that Sekiro is harder than Dark Souls. The Dark Souls fan insists that Dark Souls is harder than Sekiro, and the fans of Code Vein say that Code Vein is harder than both of those games, and of course, all of them disagree with each other. So,
yes.
Don't
My
know where
game
to
is
go
harder.
with
No, my game is harder. No, my game is harder because I'm awesomer than you. All right. If you are listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, or any of the other platforms that this podcast goes to, we appreciate your interactions there as well. And don't forget, you can join the live show on YouTube on the Triple S Podcasts channel. Tons of other content, game guides, reviews, comedy, news segments on our main Triple S League channel. And so we've got those two channels going, plus Triple S Radio, and look for a new video there this week featuring some awesome music, some from people in our community and other artists we're working with. New video going up very soon. I've got it rendered, just need to upload it, and it's got some pretty cool visuals as well, so check that out. My name is Ash. On behalf of Cyber Moontag, thank you all so much for listening today. We will talk to you again very soon.